Hello guys and welcome to another episode of Vlad Bedside Analysis. Yay! So today I'm going to look at the self-management of a property versus the tenant find service of a letting agent versus the full management service. So what that means is that when you've bought your property, you have refurbished it, it's ready to go, you've got a couple of options. You can rent it yourself. So you can advertise it yourself and rent it yourself to somebody, do the contract, and then manage it yourself. You can get a letting agent to rent it for you, and then you can manage it yourself. Or you can just give it the whole property to the letting agent, and then they will charge you a certain fee, and then they will do the management for you. There is pros and cons to all of those three options. But as always, I've got the Excel to show you what the financial differences are. So enjoy. Here is the spreadsheet that I've just finished making. So what we have is in column B is a full self-management and self-service. So you do everything yourself for this one. In C is where the agency do your finding for the tenant. So they find you a tenant, the rest you manage yourself. And the third one is the letting agency does the full management service. So that's where you give the keys from the property to the agency. They market it, they arrange the viewings, they let it out, and then they manage that tenancy. Pros and cons to each one, but let's look at it in a spreadsheet, Vlad sort of way, where we actually analyze what the differences are. And then based on that, hopefully you can decide based on your circumstances which one is better for yourself. The numbers that I've used here are actually from the letting agency that I use. It might vary for other ones, but it will give a good baseline, I would say. So what we've got in green here is buy, refurbishment, and compliance. So you will buy a buy-to-let property. When you do it yourself, you have to find a good deal yourself. If you have an agency involved, there might actually be some advice there. So you can call up your agency that you're going to use and you can say, look, I'm going to buy this 2-bedroom flat in this area. What do you think? And they can tell you, well, based on our experience, it can potentially bring that much on average. Better to get a 1-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. They can give you a bit of advice. So that's one advantage of going for an agency in that sense. Refurb, again, for full self, it's your time. You can put your time here. So you will have to spend your own time to buy refurb compliance. So refurb is your time and your knowledge. Again, with an agency, it's not going to be fully hands-off most likely, but they can advise you. They can say, don't put a wooden kitchen in, don't put in something super expensive that will get damaged potentially, but you need to focus on this and get this done. This bathroom is tall, that needs to be done. So they can give you a bit of advice, so that can be good. Whereas for yourself, you have to use your own time and your own knowledge. Compliance, the same. You have to research and do it yourself. Get all the alarms installed in the right place. Do the gas safety check. Do the electrical check. Legionella. They're not that difficult, but again, it will take more of your time. Whereas usually if you have an agency, they can arrange that for you. So you can just tell them the flat is ready. They'll be like, okay. And they will arrange for the gas check and other things to be done. So that could save you time. So this initial process, having an agency involved is very beneficial. Okay. You've now bought, refurbished, and done the compliance for the property. So it's fully ready to go. What needs to happen next is it needs to be marketed for renting. So you need to market it on Rightmove, Zoopla, places like that. Well, if you want, or market it somewhere for people to see, basically. You then need to do the viewings. So people usually would come out and see the place. It's unlikely that somebody is going to rent without even viewing the place. So you need to do the viewings, show the place to people. Do the inventory, which is all the photos, and saying this is the condition that it's in right now, just to make sure that if later on it's damaged, you can claim from the deposit. You then need to do the contract and the deposit. So a relatively standard contract in Scotland that we use, and a deposit can be 1-2 months rent. deposit needs to go into a safety deposit scheme, so you have to register for that and send that deposit there. Otherwise you'll be in breach of some conditions, so you just have to be careful with that one. And then the keys handover, that's where everything is done. The person's ready to move in, you give them the keys, you've given them all the contracts, all the certificates, etc., and it's good to go. So I think that's the letting process in its own right. If you were doing it yourself, you would market it using something like Open Rent. That's the normal place. You would spend between £70 and £120 on the marketing. You could potentially go down the route of free places. You can advertise it on Facebook Market, you can advertise it on Gumtree. In that case, this is going to be zero, but depending on which property you have, you might somehow you get better quality tenants through those websites. So usually it's good to spend that money on advertising. I've actually advertised one property a while ago on Gumtree and got some good people to move into that through Gumtree. So it doesn't always mean you have to. So that can be between £0 and £120. Viewings, that will be your time. So there's no cost to that, but it just means you have to be there. You have to arrange maybe a day of viewings, and you have to be there, welcome the people, explain them, answer the questions, etc. Inventory, again, it can be your time, which is where you come in, you do all the photo stamped pictures of the condition, and then you do a report. Contract and deposit, again, your time. Usually the contract is relatively standard, the deposit is not too hard, but you still have to register and make sure that's all set and signed and in line. For contract, you have to maybe go back and forth with the tenant, with the signatures, e-signatures, etc. So yeah, it will take some time. And then keys handover, again, you need to meet them in the property to give them the keys, or get them to collect the keys and be in the same place. So when you're doing it yourself, renting it out is very cheap, can even be free. But just keep in mind that there's a lot of your time that will be required there. So if you're a very busy man with a very difficult job, you might want to offload that and pay for it. If you have got the time and you feel like it's worth it because you're saving money, that is a good way. Next is agency. So the first, it's quite beautiful the way the birds are singing. The first one was fully self-managed. Second one is the agency tenant finding service. So having had a look at my agency, they actually charge 130 for marketing, and then they charge another 700 also for marketing. I'm not sure why that is. And then they charge another 50 quid for the deposit, for the admin that's involved in taking the deposit and transferring it to Deposit Scotland. So all in, if it's just a tenant finding service that you're after, you'll be looking at about £880 to find a tenant. So quite expensive. If you opt for the full management service, so what that means is that you will give the keys to the agency, they will take the property and do all this marketing for you, but then also keep it on, and they collect the rent, take their cut, send you the rent. So they will do the full process, full management. It's a bit cheaper. It's almost half the price. So the letting itself is about 400 quid and £50 for the deposit again. So about half that. So there you have, for the marketing and getting a tenant in, you have, as I said, 3 options. One can be free to £120, one can be pricey at about £880, and one at £450, but it comes with strings attached. You have to sign up for the full agreement, for the full management service. You have now got the tenant, got the agreement. There are other things that will need to be done after they move in. So those things are periodic checks. So that's going in a couple of times a year just to make sure the flat is not damaged. They're looking after it, give them a bit of advice on ventilation of the property, heating, etc. So the periodic checks are important. You're going to have compliance, which includes the annual gas check. Apologies, it's a little bit of a mixed up spreadsheet here, but it includes the annual gas checks. Every year you have to arrange for a gas gas certified person to come out and check any gas equipment in the house. Electrical checks are put in £130. It's every 5 years actually, so it's not as much as that, but you also need to do pat testing. Yeah, let's just say you need to change some sockets, you need to change your consumer unit from time to time, so I'll just keep it at 130. Actually, this one should be 130 also. And then repairs, I would say about £800 a year, reasonable for a property. And this is a bit of a controversial one. So with an agency, let me just freeze the top row. With an agency, there are agencies that firstly work with other companies that charge the VAT that might put the price up of any repairs. There are some agencies that take a cut. So when your boiler breaks and it costs 300 quid to repair, they might take 350 quid or 400 quid to keep some of it for themselves because they have put you in touch with that person. So there's a lot of that going on, which I think it means that a lot of time agencies actually charge more. So their repairs people are more expensive than what you can find yourself. That was my experience. If you can find an agency that has really good contacts and works all the time with various tradespeople that are good, and if they've got good people with good negotiated rates, you can actually save money. So if you find a really good agency with good people that to do the repairs, you might be 600 instead of £800 a year. So just something to keep in mind. I've had not a great experience with this. My agency doesn't have such good repairs people in my opinion, but it might be different for different agencies. But that's just my experience. Payment issues. So whenever the tenant maybe isn't paying you the rent, for fully self-managed or tenant find only service, it is your time. You're the one that has to go to the tenant and remind him that this rent is due, this needs to be paid, please make sure it's paid, blah blah blah. And then if they don't pay, you have to go through the whole process yourself, which is difficult. And that's actually included with the full management service. So if the tenant is not paying, if they're late, the agency phones them up, reminds them, pushes them to make that payment, etc. You're not protected, so if you've got an agency and the person stops paying, the agency is not going to go into their profits to top up your rent. They will help you with the whole process of eviction, going to court, etc. But a lot of the costs will land with you. So the late rent thing is better with an agency because they chase up, but equally it's not a full protection. So it's only a slight benefit. So in terms of the annual fee, if you manage it yourself, it's going to be £0. For tenant finding or only service, you're essentially managing it yourself, so it's also £0. And you're talking about maybe 10 to 12% of the rent for the letting agencies to do the management, which works out about £1,000 a year. So we've talked about the first renting to the tenant and the costs associated with that. We've now discussed the ongoing costs. So you're talking about £1,000 a year for self-managing and about 2,200 for full management agency service. And then it's unlikely that the tenant will stay forever. So if they move out, another tenant has to be brought in. For fully self-management, again, it's going to be between £3 and £120 plus your time. If it's the tenant finding service you use every time, it's about £880 each time. And if it's a full management service, you're about £450 each time you change the tenancy changes. So a lot of information, but hopefully it gives you an idea of what it's like to go through the fully self-management experience and where your time is going to be needed. The tenant finding service within the letting agencies, how that works and how that can be beneficial or not beneficial to you, and the full management service and whether that's the right thing for you. The key thing to consider is that fully self-management, you're going to be saving really good money, but you're going to be investing your time. So you need to think, how much is my time worth? So now let's have a look at two examples. Example number one, every 2 years the tenancy changes, and on average you're getting £800 per month. You are getting a total rent of £96,000 in 10 years. Your costs, if it's fully self-managed, is £10,600. If every time the tenancy changes you use the letting agency to find a new tenant, you're paying £14,400. And if you use the full management service, more hands off, you're paying £23,950. So in terms of your profit, or for the 10 years, you're talking 85,000, 81,000, 72,000. As you go to the right from self-managed to full management, you're obviously getting less profit. In terms of the yearly amount, you're talking 8.5, 8.1, 7.2. Not finding the tenants yourself and using the letting agency each time, you're talking about losing £380 a year, roughly. With a full management service, you're losing about £1,355 a year, but you're saving yourself a lot of time. So if it's one property, it's not too much hassle, but is your time worth more than this amount, more than £1,335? Do you just want to be hands off and focused on building a portfolio? Maybe that's the approach. On the other hand, do you feel like £1,335 is a decent bit of floor in your house that you would rather self-manage and invest that money into that? That's also fair enough. There's no right or wrong here, but that just gives you an idea. If we were to extrapolate that, now over 10 years, you're getting a rent of 960,000. You're now having costs of 106, 144, and 239,000. So your profits are 85,000 per year, 81,000 per year, 72,000 per year. So now you've got a portfolio of 10 properties, and now if you keep using the agency to find tenants, you're losing £3,800 a year. And if you're using a full management service, you're losing 13,350 per year. So in here, again, you might be paying 13,350 to the agency, but they're doing a great job. They are looking after all your properties. They're doing periodic checks. They've got great guys that can do repairs without you being bothered at midnight if something breaks and you have to arrange an emergency. So this might be totally worth it. Or you might think to yourself and say, that's over £1,000 a month. That's a lot of money that I'd rather have myself, and I actually have time to manage those 10 properties myself. So therefore, I'm going to opt for the fully self-managed option. I'm going to manage those properties myself, and I will then decide what to do with that extra 13k. Do I pay that to myself? Do I reinvest that into other properties? There isn't a right or wrong. For some people, self-managing really works. They have got enough time. They might be enjoying it. For other people, they want to scale, they want to grow, and they just accept that you have to take a hit on your profits if you want to have more time and you want to be able to expand your business. For me, personally, I didn't have a great experience with my agency, so I'm now moving from full management to self-management. However, I'm looking at different agencies, and if I can find one that I'm confident they have good guys for repairs that can come out and not rip you off and do a good job, if they do good inspections of the property and educate tenants on ventilation, whatever else, making sure that the flat or a house is in a good condition, if they deal with all the compliance for you without any issues, if they potentially deal with any neighbor stuff, if the place is not factored, something needs sorted, they can contact the neighbors. If they do all those things, it is probably worth it to me, but not for everyone. So hopefully this spreadsheet gives you a good understanding of fully self-managed properties, tenant finding service offered by the letting agents, and then a full management service offered by the letting agents. Hopefully it gives you some realistic numbers in terms of each one of those, how much you would expect to be paying at each stage. And then you have an example of one property and 10 properties outlook over 10 years and the differences in terms of your profit if you were to go with an agency or not. I've really enjoyed this analysis. I hope you did too. Please subscribe, and I'm looking forward to the next video. Thank you.